Hello, I'm going to talk to you today about some key differences when you are considering international universities, perhaps some really good reasons why it's important as part of your university search to consider universities beyond the UK. My name is David Hawkins. I'm the director and founder of the University Guys, and we work with students, families and their schools to support with international university applications. We do this work as members of some key global organisations, CIS, COBIS, the International Association of College Admissions Counselling, and the US-based Independent Educational Consultants Association. This means that we have a code of practice and ethics underpinning our work. We work for a student and their family in the best interest of that student. We don't take commission from universities to place you in places that might not be the best ones for you. We work directly for the student. If you'd like to be in touch, my contact details and social media tags are there on the screen now. Last year, the students we worked with gained 111 offers from universities across 6 different countries, including students inbound to the UK. And there you'll see some name brand universities on there, places like Stanford, places like Bocconi, places like Boston University. Some of the greatest successes we had there were students gaining offers from universities that they'd never realised were the perfect fit for them when they started this process. And it's really exciting for us to be able to share this list and indeed to see our students in the class of 2021 also getting great university offers. What I want to do today is try and demystify some of the processes when applying to international universities. And this is a great quote from our student Philip, who we worked with, who got his place at Stanford, to explain this idea that focusing on what matters, understanding how international universities work differently to UK universities, and getting rid of some of the myths that can sometimes cause confusion is a key part of our work at the University Guys. And this talk that I'm recording for you now is hopefully going to take that a step further. So the key message I want to get across to you is this: to when we start to think about university in other parts of the world, we need to understand that it's going to work differently. It's not like picking up a UK university, putting it in another part of the world, and it'd be basically the same, but maybe with better weather. It's a completely different way university works. And I'll be very honest, at the University Guys, so many times we deal with students who kind of miss the point that it's different. They're trying to apply the rules of UCAS to another country and getting themselves in a little bit of a tears and making decisions that don't quite work for them. And the best way we found of explaining this at the University Guys is to focus on an analogy, on a word that also means different things in different parts of the world, and that word is football. So talking to you guys now, when I'm recording this here in England, when we think of the word football, we're going to think of a sport like this. It's a round ball, it's 11 v 11, we're trying to kick that ball into the goal. But if I was having this conversation to a group of students maybe based in New York or New Jersey, and I said describe football, they'd be thinking of a very different sport. Now, you wouldn't turn up to play American football thinking it was soccer. You wouldn't have the pads, you wouldn't have the helmet, you wouldn't have all the kind of different tactics and strategy and vocabulary and things you would need. Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of students apply to international universities thinking they're playing British rules. They are not learning the language, the process, the protection, the strategy that you would need to do to be successful at that. And so what I really want to emphasize today is this idea of you have to learn the rules of a completely different game. And if you think it's like UCAS, but just slightly different, this is where students end up getting really, really disappointed with their international university offers, made a bunch of mistakes that they're not even aware that they're making. And it's my great pleasure to run the University Guys to help schools and students learn this kind of stuff. And there are so many opportunities out there. The most recent data we have from the Independent Schools Council Census 2019 shows that 5% of all UK private school students went to a non-UK university. More students than did Oxford or Cambridge, more students than did medicine. And you might be that 5% of students, you might be in that group that think, you know what, my university experience could be really, really different. Because just as there are many different ideas of what football is, I could have thrown in Aussie rules, I could have thrown in Gaelic football, there are so many different ideas of what university can be. It could be something hyper-urban. You'll notice on the edge here the purple flag. That is the purple flag of New York University. It could be a slap bang in the middle of Manhattan, in the most hyper-urban university experience you could consider. You could be somewhere completely different. This is Segovia in Spain, the little building there with the cars parked in front of it. It's one of the 2 campuses of IE University. IE University, an international university with this campus in Segovia, another campus in Madrid, in the top 10 list of non-UK destinations on that ISC survey. I'm really privileged to serve on the Council Advisory Board for IE. It's an amazing university with really wonderful outcomes, but again, a very different opportunity. And it could be something actually recognisably kind of British. Gosh, this kind of looks like a British university. Well, it's a British Isles university. This is the historic library at Trinity College in Dublin. So something that's relatively close to the UK, but again, going to be slightly different. And these are all different universities in different systems, which are going to be looking for different kinds of students, and the whole process is going to work differently. And at the University Guys, we've kind of come up with 4 reasons why university overseas is different. 4 things that might attract you to it, that might put you off it, but 4 things you also need to understand to be successful in the process. And these are the 4. The way in which students choose universities is different. The fact that in many countries you don't pick a subject to study when you apply. The third one is how you assess the quality of university. What makes university good works differently. And the last one is how you apply is different. So let's delve into these now. The first one then, this idea of how you would choose where to apply is different. The UK model is very much based on 2 things. What do you want to study? And what grades do you need to be able to study it? And that actually makes our whole process of finding where to apply really easy. One of the big questions we get on the University Guys is people saying, how do I know where to apply? I've gone to study chemistry and I've got an A and 2 Bs. Because we're used to in UCAS of being able to find that information. It actually lulls us into a false sense of how easy the process works. It is not that way internationally. To us, I think it shouldn't be. You should have to spend more time finding the experience that works for you. Because if you can't say, I've got these grades for this subject, here's 12 universities I can apply to, you're going to have to make better choices. And let me give you some examples of that. The US is a great way of thinking about this, because when you apply to universities in the United States, in most cases, you're not applying to study a subject. What are you applying for? You're applying for the experience of being a member of that university. It's a really different way of looking at it. This will work very much for a lot of European universities or the Canadian universities, where actually that whole experience is a key thing to be part of. So in the US, for example, here, you've got to focus on, well, what are these different experiences? We've got Dartmouth College in the middle here. I've got the blue flags of UCLA, and there's that purple of NYU again. Now, these are 3 world-class universities. They're going to want students with really strong grades, but they're actually will probably deny a student not because of the grades, because they don't fit what they're offering. Dartmouth is a good example to start with. It's part of the Ivy League. Hint, Ivy League is not an academic term. It's a sports competition. And if you're sitting here thinking I'm applying to the Ivy League, what you're actually saying is you know almost diddly squat about applying to the US. They are not the 8 oldest, 8 best, 8 most prestigious, or the 8 hardest to get into. It's 8 who play sports against each other. Anyway, Dartmouth, small town of Hanover, New Hampshire, forests, mountains, a couple of hours from Boston, a couple of hours from Burlington. It's a small community. Dartmouth know that in order to succeed there, you're going to have to cope with being in a small community. And so they test this when you apply. Yes, they want a counsellor reference. Yes, they want 2 other teacher references, but they very much like you to send a 4th reference. This reference should be written by a friend, someone else in your year group at school, to talk about how you are a good member of a community. Now, that might seem odd to us, but Dartmouth know in their experience that community aspect is really, really strong. Now, if you look at that and go, that's not for me, then you wouldn't apply to Dartmouth, even if maybe your grades are good enough to be a realistic applicant. Now, in contrast, we've got UCLA. The University of California is a really complicated university. UCLA gets over 100,000 applications a year. LA itself is a really big, complicated city to be a student in. When you apply to the UC system, you don't send any references at all. In fact, your school will do nothing, no predicted grades, no transcript, nothing at all. You have to be independent. Because it's a university, you're going to have to be independent to succeed. You see the difference. And then the third one at NYU here, yes, community is important, but as you've seen, it's in that big city. You might find community in New York, but it might not be at NYU. And NYU has this kind of mission statement idea of being in and of New York City. So when you're applying to NYU, you're going to have to demonstrate that. How will I take the resources of New York University and add those to the community and the resources of New York City to get an experience that's right for me? Again, very different kind of student. So when you're applying to the US and you're picking where to apply, it's not about where's good for the subject I want to study. It's what is that experience that university is offering, and do I fit that experience? This is why applying to the Ivy League is a really stupid idea, because what Dartmouth are looking for is what is completely different from Cornell, it's completely different from Brown, it's completely different from Harvard. And the student who says, actually, I'm applying to the Ivy League, it's like you're trying to write a UCAS statement just saying, I'm applying to university. UCAS statement's going to be pretty weak because it's not tailored to what you're applying for, And in the US, when you're picking that right experience, you need to pick for coherent universities offering similar experiences, and tailor your application to that. You also need to think about things that you might not occur that we're coming into this idea of choosing a university. Like, do you want to go to a university where you live at university? Now, in the UK model, that's what we do. You can see the stats here, about 80% of students left home. In other countries, that's not the case. Now, if people aren't living at university, where are they living? Well, they might be living at home. They might be living in a house with a bunch of friends that they went to school with, and they've all gone to the same university, maybe in the next town over. And so we might assume that the university is going to be a residential experience, but that could not be the case in many countries. Europe's a good situation here to think of. So do you want a residential experience? Now, you might assume that every university is like that, but that's not necessarily the case. Do you want to go to a university that teaches everything, a comprehensive university? And again, most UK universities are like this. You might be studying engineering, the person living across the corridor is studying languages, the person on one side is studying history, the person on the other side is studying biology. That's a comprehensive university. But across the world, we have lots of very specialized universities, and not just music schools or drama schools like we have in the UK, but business schools, places like ESSEC in France, engineering schools like Caltech out in California, even places that focus on really narrow things like Arc in Prague, just doing architecture. Now, those places that are only focusing on one area of study may not actually be undergraduate focused. They may not be set up mostly to deal with 18, 19, 20-year-olds doing their first degree. These might be places that are set up for people doing a second degree, doing a master's, maybe people who actually run a company and want to go and do an MBA or a little short course. Now, if a university is mostly focused on people in their 30s or their 40s, your social life is going to be quite different. You're not going to be turning up in flip-flops and ripped jeans to business classes where you might be sitting aside people who are already CEOs. The accommodation is going to be different. So again, what's the focus of the university? Do you really know that field of study you want to go into? Would it be great to actually your best friend that you're playing soccer with or in the orchestra with is someone who might be hiring you in 2 years' time? Or do you want to go somewhere with a bunch of teenagers where you can do all the kind of teenagers with student stuff? And again, different options to choose from. Second reason then, what you will study is different. So again, we have this model in the UK, and it does happen in many other countries as well, where we go to university to study a subject. But that is not automatically the case a lot of international universities. I'll use the US again as an example here. What do you think you'll study if you go to MIT? People go physics, maths, engineering. Well, you can, and you will have to do some of that, but you don't necessarily have to. And you're not going to just do only those things. This is taken from MIT's website. This is their core curriculum. And in the liberal arts and sciences model, like in the US, you're going to have a core curriculum that every student studies regardless of what they're majoring in. So at MIT, their core has half science and maths and half humanities, arts and social sciences. Yes, if you go to MIT, you're still going to take language classes, humanities classes, literature classes. You may still be studying Shakespeare. That's very odd in the UK model, where you kind of might even have given up that stuff after GCSEs. But in the liberal arts and sciences model, you retain academic breadth. And that's best explained by my table here. In the UK model of a UK degree, you get what you've applied for. I studied history at Oxford. They gave me a lot of history classes and I did exams about history. It's like going out for a set menu at a restaurant. If you've gone out for Italian food, you would expect to be given Italian food. You wouldn't be told, no, you've got to eat some Korean food and a bit of Libyan food first. In the US degree style, the liberal arts and sciences, which also happens in Canada and some places in Europe and increasingly across Asia, it's like going out for a buffet. Everything's there and I'll pick and mix my own degree. So if you want to combine maths with a language, with a bit of creative subjects, then you can do. But also important to know that different universities will be more or less strict on what you have to study. Like I've just shown you at MIT, it's very, very normal for even a student studying physics or engineering to still be taking classes in a language, in a literature, in maths, in physics. And equally the same way around for a student doing the humanities. Even lots of universities, Columbia is a great example of this, will still make you take physical education classes. Columbia actually makes you take a swimming test in order to graduate. So a completely different idea of thinking, well, what am I going to university to do? And again, a lot of students applying to other countries kind of assume, I'm going to study chemistry here, I'll study chemistry there. No, it's not necessarily going to work in that way. You've got to really do the research to focus on what you're applying for. Now, in contrast to MIT, just to show you how different it can be, here's Brown. Actually, if you just want to study maths, Brown's a better place to do it in than MIT because Brown has no required core curriculum. It's one of the very few US universities with an open curriculum. We've also got this halfway house between maybe the breadth of liberal arts and sciences. We've got the narrow single honours focus in the UK, where you can kind of have a mix of the both. So Canada, also quite similar in South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, you're applying to a general programme of study. So that chemist going to a Canadian university would be applying for a Bachelor of Science, where you can still switch between the sciences, you can still take other classes within the sciences. Even at some universities, if you want to, you could take a language class, a business class, but it's all within Bachelor of Science, or the humanities and social sciences and Bachelor of Arts as well. The other two are fairly self-explanatory. But a combination of breadth and depth, halfway maybe between the US and the UK model, liberal arts and sciences versus single or joint honours. We've even got different ways those subjects might be taught. The Universities of Applied Sciences is something very common in Europe, also have it the Institutes of Technology in Ireland, where the same subject might be taught in different ways by different types of university. A research university would be, again, what we kind of imagine in the UK, that traditional academic education, go to lectures, do labs, learn a bunch of stuff, and then do something with that stuff in exams, in tests, and in practicals. But we also have universities of applied sciences where the idea is actually not to learn why stuff happens theoretically, but actually how do I do it? So in the University of Applied Sciences, you'll typically have a compulsory internship. You're going to be working with people who are actually in that field. So maybe rather than learning the theory of business, you'll actually be launching a business in the University of Applied Sciences. Then when we start to get into all sorts of different parts of the world, the models can really get very different. In Japan, in Hong Kong and Singapore, we've got all sorts of different ways of doing university. In the Hong Kong system, very grades-based, apply to lots of different places, and you can hold multiple offers. In Japan, all sorts of different ways university works, quite honour-based in some of the different ways. We've got Asian liberal arts colleges, SILS at Waseda, Ashoka in India, NYU Abu Dhabi, or the Yale and US campus in Singapore. We've got global rotation options where actually, like the World Bachelor in Business, you move throughout your degree. The World Bachelor in Business is a year at Bocconi in Milan, a year at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, a year at the University of Southern California, and then year 4 going back to one of those. Australia and New Zealand, because the climate works on the other hemisphere, you've got a completely different way which is going to work as well. So you might start university in February and finish the year in November. So many different ways your university experience in terms of the academics can be quite different. Third point, how do you assess where's good? What makes a university good? Well, it means different things in different countries. And again, in the UK, we have a very different approach to most of the rest of the world. We have a hierarchy. You go to the best place you can get into, and best typically is defined by grades. I'll give you a secret. UK universities know this. There are universities which would take you with 3 Bs at A level, but they advertise the course at 3 As because they know at 3 As you think, gosh, that's a good course. I might apply there, and if I'm lucky, I'll get in. If they advertised it at 3 Bs, you probably wouldn't do it. That grades-based entry requirement system is not really how in other countries they assess the quality of the university. I mentioned the Ivy League already. Is it the US version of the Russell Group? Well, of course it's not. It's a sports competition. The actually equivalent of the Russell Group is the Association of American Universities, research-intensive, very heavily funded universities with medical schools. Red Brick universities in Canada. Well, again, how do we assess the relative quality? We can't take British rules and apply them to another country. We can't go and play American football with the rules of soccer. So the entry requirements don't tell us the quality of a university. We need to learn the rules of a different country. And it's important to then understand this when we look at different places. I'll use the US as an example again. When we talk about universities like Harvard or Brown or Princeton, people go, well, maybe it's like going to King's London or UCL or Imperial. It's really not in terms of the selectivity. The usual universities are a magnitude of selectivity above anything we've got in the UK. There are actually 57 US universities that are more selective than Oxford and Cambridge, based on the last admission statistics. So when you start to look at Harvard, you look at sort of the grades you're going to need just to be competitive. This is not to be automatically in. This is just to have a chance. 15 to 20 UK passport holders in each year group at Harvard. It's tiny. It's a tiny university. Saying I want to go to Harvard isn't like saying I want to go to Oxford. It's like saying I'd like to live in that particular dorm room of that college at Oxford in terms of how the scale of selectivity is in. And this is the point I'm saying here, is to understand the relative scale when we're looking at good universities. This is a great stat to kind of give you the sense of it. In 2019, just over 240,000 British 18-year-olds went to university. That is a smaller number than the total number of people the Ivy League rejected. You know, that seems crazy. Well, not when you consider there are 3.5 million students at high school in the US. So you're looking at maybe 350,000 UK 18-year-olds leaving school every year. So it's 10 times as many in the US. So you would expect their universities to be dealing on a different scale. You would expect there having to be more universities, more good universities. And therefore, when you start to look at what's good, if you're thinking, well, maybe there are 8 universities in the UK that I think would be about right for me, you have to apply that scale factor and think, well, maybe there'll be 80 in the US that are good for me. But that's quite hard. You wouldn't maybe apply to the 80th ranked university in the UK if you had maybe straight A's at A level. And so when you start to look at the 80th ranked university in the US, psychologically, you're like, well, it can't be any good if it's only ranked 80th. Well, when there are 4,500 universities, yes, it can be, when actually the top 10% of students is 350,000 students compared to maybe 35,000 in the UK, you have to go for a bigger scale. Now, this might work the other way around as well. If you go into somewhere like Ireland, which only has about 65,000 students leaving high school every year, you might go from maybe 8 universities in the UK you're looking at to maybe 1, 2 in Ireland you're looking at. So that relative scale when assessing quality is really, really important. Say here's an example of Ireland. It's not a massive university sector, so you would bring your scale the other way. Again, don't apply the British rules to any other country. Now, when we then start to delve into this, data is important. So when we're assessing the quality of a university, we need to look at the actual data rather than myths that are put out to us by the media. There are universities in here you've probably never heard of, places like Bowdoin, places like William, places like Swarthmore, which are more selective than any UK university. Imperial and LSE are about 11%. You go, wow, are these places any good? I haven't heard of them. Well, the fact that you haven't heard of them doesn't mean they're not good. It just means you haven't heard of them. And yes, these are really, really awesome universities. And the same applies in many other countries around the world. Just to really hammer home that point, this is a great stat showing where Harvard Law School accepted students into, this being the postgraduate university. 184 universities that weren't Harvard that got you a degree good enough to go to Harvard. The point being that hierarchical model that you've got to go to the quote unquote best university you can get into doesn't work in other parts of the world. It also doesn't work when we start to look at countries where the entry requirement system is completely different. This is KU Leuven in Belgium, a wonderful university, 4 courses taught in English, and it's QS top 50 in the world. And yet 3 Cs at A level might get you in. Now, again, to the British mindset, 3 Cs, well, how can it be top 50 in the world with 3 Cs? We're applying that British mindset incorrectly. In a lot of European universities, the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, France, etc., the minimal entry requirements are just to get in for the first year. You're through the gate, but they will then select you after the gate again, year 1 to year 2. In a university like KU Leuven, you might need to get 85% in your first year exams to then stay. Completely different mentality of how universities select. And so just because the entry requirements seem low doesn't mean it's not an academically rigorous university. They just have a different culture of how they do it. And then we have universities all over the world where actually the grades are a factor, but your aptitudes are an even more important factor. This is a great example here, École Hôtelière de Lausanne in Switzerland, the world's best hospitality management university. This is not training you to wash dishes or make beds. You're going to be the manager of a 5-star luxury hotel or a suite of Louis Vuitton boutiques or managing a fleet of super yachts or doing private banking when you leave this university. But it's about soft skills. It's not about being good at writing essays. It's about being able to solve problems with people, to bring teams together, to put on an experience. And so they might turn down a student with 4 A stars at O level with 42 plus on the IB and take a student with straight Bs, because that student with straight Bs can still do the academics of the course, but also has maybe those people skills that student with them slightly higher grades doesn't have. And again, doesn't mean it's not good. It's just good in a different way to maybe what we'd be used to in the UK. The last point I want to make about international universities is the idea that applications don't work like UCAS. We have an extraordinarily streamlined system in the UK. We have a system which is unusual. And so we're kind of used to the idea of kind of the timelines. I'm recording this now in middle of October 2020, and I'm having students coming to me now saying, oh, can I start my US applications now? They're due in like 13, 14, 15 days, some of these applications. You should have been doing this a year ago. Oh, I didn't know. I thought it was like UCAS. Why would it be like UCAS? UCAS is a really simple system. You need to not start late. Part of this is because they do have different application systems. So there are a few other countries which have something a bit like UCAS, like the Netherlands and Ireland, but it works on a different basis. We have some countries which have competing systems. So the US is a good example again. Depending on which university you're applying to, you're going to have to deal with a different system. It's actually fairly likely you might have to deal with at least 3 different application systems, depending on where you're applying. Canada has a federal system, so depending on where the university is in Canada, you might have to use a different application portal. And more commonly around the world, actually, the expectation is you apply directly. This means you're going to have different essay requirements, different deadlines, different paperwork, different things that your school's going to have to do. On a simple level, different logins and passwords you're going to have to remember as well. So it takes more work. You have to start earlier. Now, once you've actually dealt with the bureaucracy, what you actually have to do could be much less. Like, for example, in Canada, you're actually not going to do a lot of writing. In fact, in a lot of places, you won't have to write anything. Who are you? What have you studied at school? What would you like to study with us? But it could equally be, and again, I'll come back to the US, a lot more work. These are 3 of the 7 Common App prompts, the sort of essay that you write that you're probably going to send to every university you apply to. Because you're not applying for a subject, you can't write about how good you are at chemistry. Who are you? What is the meaning of your life to date? And these students who are emailing now saying, I've done nothing, I want to get started. I say, well, I've spent 4 months with some students helping them with these essays. You can't suddenly knock out a good one in 12 days. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have to write essays for each college you apply to as well. And when you start thinking, well, maybe I'm applying to IE and Bocconi and the Rotterdam School of Management and EdHec, those are different universities where you can't just send the same UCAS statement because you're not just applying generically for the course. You've got to know, why do I want to go to this university? What is it about a particular professor whose class you'd like to have or a particular internship? This takes much more research. It takes longer to apply to international universities. We've also got to understand that, again, it might not just be about doing well in a subject. It might be just about having the right subjects. In a lot of European countries, we have a credential-based admissions. Have you got the right bits of paper? And in places like Germany and Switzerland, that can be really very complicated. To study at any public university in Germany, you're going to have taken a first language and a second language, maths or one of the traditional sciences, and one of the traditional humanities. That's just to study anything. Now, you can have 4 A stars in maths, further maths, physics, and chemistry. You're not eligible to go to any public university in Germany, or indeed Switzerland for that matter. If you've got Ds in maths, biology, so maths, history, English, and French, you are eligible. Now, that again seems odd to us. Well, how can Ds get me in and A stars not? It's because about how the process works. We've also got different ways in which admissions works within that system. You can have what we call numerus fixus or numerus clausus, which is where there's a set number of places on a course and there's extra rankings that go into it. In Ireland, for EU applicants and UK applicants, we have a matching system rather than a selection system where you apply and then you don't know where you got into until everybody's got their grades in August. So all this whole idea about how you might select universities in a credential-based system can work very differently. Now, I've thrown a huge amount of information at you there, and I only really just scratched the surface, but I do want to say that you can get more information. This is our website, theuniversityguys.com. If you click on the knowledge page, you'll see all this information here with a bunch of blogs, recorded webinars, and indeed a range of podcasts. If you want to contact us directly to have a meeting, go to theuniversityguys.com/initial meeting, and you can book a time to have a chat with me completely free of charge for 25 minutes, 30 minutes, just to find out whether this might be an option for you and which countries might work best for you. If you've listened to podcasts, please find us on Apple, Spotify, and other places, the University Guide podcast, again, talking about international universities. And if you would like help going through this process, we run a 3-step process of working out where do you want to go to, what you need to do to get ready to go there, and then finally helping you with applications. You can get hold of me via my WhatsApp there or email david@theuniversityguys.com. I hope that was a useful introduction to international universities, and I look forward to hearing from some of you in due course.